Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this live streaming of celebrating 30 years of Kurt Cobain, who has now passed away. Um, anyway, I expect that I probably won't get a lot of viewers tonight, and I expect I won't get a lot of viewers for a few different reasons. Number one, it's Friday night. Number two, so everybody's out doing something fun, except for me. I'm home alone as normal. And the other thing is that I haven't done any of these live streams in a long time, so I just think that it's just not going to go well. But anyway, that's okay because I have a lot to say about Kurt Cobain and how he influenced my life and how he affected my life, and how I'm shocked that it's been 30 years. So you get to listen to me bloviate about Kurt Cobain and his life and his influence on me personally, his influence on music, and his influence on on society or whatever, and why we're still talking about him 30 years after his death. There's just a few bands that we talk about like that. So I will start out by talking about, I remember the day that Kurt Cobain passed away. And it was a very, very devastating day for me. I mean, it didn't start out devastating. It was, I think it was around April 10th, because I think it took them a few days to find the body, and I'm just kind of going on memory at this point. But I do remember that I walked into the house that I was living in, and um, I turned on MTV, and on MTV there was Kurt Loder, who was doing. I think it was called The Week in Rock at one point, but I think they had changed the name, like Music News or something like that. And Nirvana was on, so I was just like, shh, everybody, Nirvana's on, because I was just obsessed with Nirvana, and they were playing some music, and and then Kurt Loder comes on and he says, well, if you never got a chance to see them live, you never will again. And I remember those words specifically. And I was just like, what? What? And then so then I honed in, just from being, hey, Nirvana's on, having a good time, to focusing in on, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's going on? And then the tragic news about his suicide. And so I just lost it. I was devastated by it, and I was sad by it, because quite honestly, there was a me, like I have a lot of like me before and me after, and some of them are more significant than others. But there was certainly a me before Nirvana and a me after Nirvana. And I mean, I talk about me before Christ and me after Christ, and I talk about me, there's different things that have marked me significantly in my life. uh, uh, um, and so um, but for me, Kurt Cobain kind of, not only did he break the underground, but he broke the kind of the underground in me as well. And he taught me to be more of an authentic person. So I've shared this before, but I'm going to share it again, just because this is what we're talking about again. Um, I grew up in the midst of the height of hair metal and the height of this underground emerging movement called alternative rock and grunge rock. And I was when I was, 14, 15, 16, 17, I really wanted to be the next, like, Vince Neil. Motley Crue was my favorite band. I loved Motley Crue. I loved Poison. I loved Rat. I loved Dokken. But I also loved like bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and those kind of stuff still do. Um, and but the differences between standard heavy metal and standard underground movement was the difference between the surface me and the genuine me. I'm glad to see everybody here as well. Let's see here. McGowan Sky Jellyfish says, I didn't like how Kurt Cobain disrespected Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. He disrespected a lot of bands, and maybe I'll put a pin in that. If I don't remember it, remind me again, because I kind of want to talk about this new emergence of the grunge movement. And I really think that if it wasn't for Nirvana, there wouldn't have been all the backlash towards the hair bands. And Tracy Rothmeyer says, I am so glad to see you. I am so glad to see you. Thank you for being here with me as well. So I wanted to be the next Vince Neil because that was what's popular at the time. But again, heavy metal was built around like this over the top, masculine, excess, excess. And it was, for me, it was a false kind of excess. It was a lot of pretending for me, pretending that I was better than I was. I was pretending that I was something I wasn't. I dyed my hair blonde to look like Vince Neil back in, the late 80s. And it was all pretend. It was all show, much like kind of hair metal is to a degree anyway. I know that those people lived that way and they had those excesses, but I was just kind of pretending I had those excesses. But inside I was super depressed. And at the same time, there was these bands that were kind of coming out on like Alternative Nation and 120 Minutes, and just some bands that were getting some extra airplay. And I liked them, but I wasn't like into them. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't my crowd. It wasn't my demeanor. I liked, like The Cult, and I was really liking bands like, there were just different, like Jane's Addiction was kind of coming out at the same time, and I dug some of their music. But I would listen to Jane's Addiction, but like I was still looking very much like somebody who would have been in a typical hair band. And then Nirvana came out, and it changed. Like I said, it changed a lot for me. And his authenticity around writing a really super good song, catchy songs, of course, with that album, Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was, very, very catchy and very, got you to listen. But there was an edge to it. There's this rawness. He didn't like sing like any other singer sang. He wasn't like hitting all the high notes and running off all these falsettos like Sebastian Bach or somebody like that. And he was singing about like struggles and weird stuff too, like just kind of like stuff that didn't make sense, and you couldn't make sense of his lyrics. I remember like you couldn't even understand what he was saying. You had to get like the lyric sheet to kind of understand what he was talking about. And I just remember kind of like gravitating toward that, like just almost like there's something in you, like when you almost are like in love with something, like you just like there's something in you that gravitates toward that particular thing. And so like that's what it was with me. And then the next thing you know, I was cutting my hair. I started wearing more, like more, I don't know, what would you call it? Like grunge kind of outfits, a lot of plaid kind of stuff. It was just one of those things that kind of opened up. And I realized what Kurt Cobain did for me was he like made it okay to be like a loser, or to really show your true emotions, or to kind of take off your mask, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of what he did for me personally. And so I started to like go talk about like more stuff that was going on, less surface, and being able to be a little bit more real about who I was as an individual. So let's see here. Teb's here. Thank you, Teb. Welcome back, Ian. Well, thank you, Teb. There are very few things that are going to bring me out of retirement. And there's a few things that almost brought me out of retirement. And that was Matthew Perry's death, I really thought about going and doing something about Matthew Perry, and then Paul Rubin's death as well. Um, but at the time that those things happened, I was really in a dark place in my life, and I just didn't have the wherewithal to kind of be able to do something like this. And I was just super unmotivated to do it. I should have done it, especially with Matthew Perry. Um, Paul Rubin too, but I mean, with Matthew Perry, there's very few people I identify with more than with Matthew Perry, and Friends. And whenever, I mean, I watch Friends so much that I evaluate my whole life based on Friends. Like everybody I meet, I'm like, oh, that person's more Phoebe or Monica or Chandler or whatever. And I consider myself kind of like 50% Chandler, 40% Joey, 10% Ross, and that's kind of almost how I self-identify. So I watch Friends so much that like I have a Friends filter on my world. Um, anyway, but that didn't bring me out of. The only reason it didn't bring me out of retirement at the time is due to the fact that I just wasn't at a good place in my mind right now. And quite honestly, I'm at a better place in my mind right now than I've been in a long time. So that's good. I'm getting over some personal heartaches, and I'm hoping to kind of do things. I'm on a personal note here. We're not talking about Nirvana anymore. We're talking about me. That's okay. Um, I'll be moving back to St. George, Utah pretty soon here. And I'll be able to be in my studio. I'm just going to kind of reevaluate my existence back there. And I got a job waiting for me, and it's been tough to be in Tennessee. And I've loved it here in Tennessee. And my plan is to come back, but I'm just not quite ready to come back. But I left like a lot of my equipment when I moved back this time. When I moved here back in January, when I moved back this time, I left a lot of my recording equipment back home. So I don't really have a lot of this. You can kind of see, like, you see the shadow. Like, I don't have my ring light on me anymore, and I don't have my stand to be able to do it. Let's see what some of the people have written here. And I'll wait. I think maybe some more people will come in. But like I said, it's a Friday night. I haven't done this in a while. We'll see if people show up or don't show up. Let's see here. Kurt Cobain was the John Lennon of the 90s. Nirvana brought grunge into the mainstream the same way the Beatlemania was brought over into the States. I absolutely 100% agree with that, Teb. Yeah, there's a reason why we're still talking about Kurt Cobain 30 years later, and he's still like on covers of magazines, and he's such quite an influence because he didn't, like a lot of people, even like the Beatles. I mean, it's like the Beatles started rock and roll or anything like that. And there were a few forerunners, of course, like a big one before that would have been Elvis. But for the most part, you got like Beatlemania kind of breaking the scene. And then a lot of bands that were already there got exposure because of the Beatles. And a lot of bands then tried to copy the Beatles. And so the same thing happened with Nirvana. There were a lot of bands that were there that that got a spotlight as a result of the explosion of Nirvana. But then there were a lot of bands that actually try to copy Nirvana as well. So let's see here. Tracy says, I hope so, Ian. You are worth it. Well, thank you, Tracy. I love you very much. Thank you very much. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the controversy surrounding Nirvana, especially. With the advent of Nirvana, and this is kind of like some of my talking points that I have about the band Nirvana. With the advent of Nirvana came a backlash specifically against a lot of metal, and specifically a lot against hair metal, which honestly I don't think would have happened without Nirvana. We've always had advents of new music. We've always had advents of new rock music. And so, for example, when New Wave came out, new wave wasn't like going around kind of making fun of 70s classic rock. They just were doing their own thing. Uh, However, with the popularity of Nirvana, so take a band like, let's say, and Lane Staley died on the same date, by the way. So take a band like Alice in Chains. The popularity of Alice in Chains did not affect the dispopularity or the making fun of bands like Poison. But the popularity of Nirvana did, I believe, start making fun of bands like Poison and Motley Crue and things like that. And the reason why is, of course, Nirvana was the band that broke it. I mean, they were the most successful, most popular band. And Kurt himself, who felt a victim of people who were in that atmosphere, made it a point to make fun of them. And so then when they got popular and Kurt's ideas got popular, a lot of people jumped on that as well. And I did too. I was one of those people who kind of jumped on it and tried to pretend like, oh, I never liked these bands ever. I unfortunately, I kind of became a phony in a different way. I tried to pretend like, oh, I was never into these bands. Now that I'm older, I can kind of respect all music for what it is. I like what I like. I don't like what I don't like. But I can respect like bands like Poison and Motley Crue and listen to them sometimes and feel them for what they're worth and what value that they bring. But at the time, now there was a sense too in which hair metal did this to themselves, because hair metal almost became a parody of itself. I mean, it was just about, who could sing the best, the highest, who could be the next Sebastian Bach and who could be the next lead guitarist, like, I don't know, like Don Dot or George Lynch. And the songs kind of got lost in it. It really, and I've made this point before on my video, like 3 things that divide the difference between grunge rock and alternative rock. And really, like, it became almost like the song was inconsequential for rock. It was like the song was there to be a platform for the singer and be a platform for the guitarist, particularly. The bass and drums were just there to kind of keep the beat. Where when alternative rock turned on, it was the opposite. It was more about the song and less about how well the person sang. And so so it was more about how well the song was written. I really felt like especially when you get to the late 80s and even into like 90 and 91, where you had bands like Danger coming out and Steel. On some of these bands, it was really more about like, well, this, like Sebastian Bach sings pretty high, but how high does this guy sing? And like it was, and you're really listening to the talent of the singer and the talent of the guitarist rather than if the song's any good. And it became a parody of themselves. And with Kurt kind of coming out and breaking this kind of underground music, and then plus his own personal struggle with being bullied by people who were in this genre of music. And Mr. Mustache, by the way, is an example of a song about that on Bleach. He felt the need to say something about it, and then everybody started saying things about it. Everybody started making fun of hair metal. So there was like this 2-pronged approach to its demise, basically. All right, here, let's see. Let's read some, if I can read. Thrash Pondo's not with me tonight. I kind of wanted to do this alone, but I know that Thrash Pondo is probably out working tonight. I know he bartends, so Friday night's going to be a big night for him. All right. A lot of hair metal bands faded into obscurity once Nirvana hit the scene, while others completely changed their sound and image in to stay relevant. Yes, there was a lot of shifting of bands that happened, um, and is there's a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if I can quite say it. Inauthenticness and authenticity um, when it comes to that. But I mean, I understand sometimes bands had to survive to be able to do that, uh, but it came off as inauthentic, and if the alternative rock scene was authentic. So one band that tried that was Kiss, um, with their Circus Nitro. Was it Nitro Circus? I can't remember the exact name of the album. I know it had circus in it somewhere, but these are businessmen who know how to make a profit. And so when the alternative scene hit, they tried to come out with a more edgy alternative rock, and they were just rejected because the alternative rock scene kind of saw it for what it was, and that was just people trying to make a buck, and they weren't having anything to do with it. And the alternative scene really did grow out of the punk movement, which had that authenticity to it as well. And Sunshine Cool Water, thank you for joining me today. It says Kurt's death affected Gen X as much as John Lennon's murder affected boomers. At least we had Elliott Smith for a few years afterwards. I quit listening to popular music after that. Yes, thank you for that. And it did affect us the way he was the voice of our generation. And even what was crazy is because there are a lot of Gen Xers who don't like Kurt Cobain whatsoever. And that's kind of sad to me. But anytime you have somebody growing in popularity, you also have the backlash of that just because they're popular. You have people who hate just because they want to hate. And Kurt Cobain was a big fan of John Lennon, which I mean, the Beatles were a band that was 4 people, and 2 of them really ran the gamut. And those 2 that ran the gamut were John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And of course, they had very different styles of music. John Lennon was more feelings, emotion based, talk about substantive issues. And Paul McCartney was more, not that he didn't ever do that. He wrote great music. I love Paul McCartney, don't misunderstand me, but he was more pop oriented. And at the time where people were trying to like distance themselves from the Beatles, here comes Kurt Cobain, who was trying to more identify, especially with John Lennon. Anyway, I don't know. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. See, Terrell Bellinger says, Teb says, as a millennial myself, I feel about the backlash between Nickelback and rock fans similar to what Gen X felt about the backlash between grunge fans and hair metal fans. I got to say, I feel bad for Nickelback. Nickelback just got into it at the wrong time. I mean, you've got a real, when I listen to Nickelback, you've got like a real sense of grunge rock going on. And then at the same time, you have a real sense of, a new movement. And they just, I think they're a great band, but they just got caught at this time where kind of people were starting to turn away from grunge and also look at grunge as a commodity. And they just got caught at the wrong time. And there was just so much hate towards them to otherwise being a really, really good band. And then Tracy Rothmeyer's writes, loved Kurt. He was always very innovative. Yes, he was. And it's very interesting that you bring that up, Tracy, because there was a while there where I didn't really argue that Nirvana was a grunge band. I'll talk about why here. Um, Now they are technically grunge, but if you look at the grunge movement and the big four that came out of that, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, uh, um, uh, programs, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Nirvana. Nirvana is the one that sticks out. Like to me, they sounded more like dirty punk than what all the other stuff that was coming out of Seattle. Now, when you look at Seattle, there was like a lot of music going on that didn't make it. That they didn't make it. There was or bands that were popular but never exploded the way those big four did. Bands like Mudhoney, L7, and some other bands like that. Um, and uh, and so there was a wide range of influences there. Uh, but the reason we're talking about Nirvana is because I believe anyway, and what made them stand out was their real more or less punk pop influence that Kurt had, and he was innovative enough um, he was innovative enough to um, uh, put that in there into his songs and not care or not know that it was actually going to, I believe, put him over the top against the rest of those bands. So I really appreciated Kurt for that. And I just believe it gave him an extra. I mean, yes, you know, like I look at like Alice in Chains, who probably would be my second favorite band that came out of that movement. Um, and they came out with Man in the Box that was kind of getting a lot of airplay during that time and kind of paved the road for Nirvana. But they didn't break the scene. Let's be honest, they didn't break the scene. The band that broke the scene was Nirvana. And what was it that set Nirvana apart? Well, he didn't have the Jarl. He didn't have the he didn't have the low kind of tone to him. He sang in a little bit of a higher pitch, and his songs were more hooky, more they had more of a pop sensibility to them, and they were a little bit more punk. And beside the clothing and beside the kind of the raw edge to it, I really felt like they were just like dirty punk rock. Like they were a dirty version of the Pixies, quite honestly. So his innovation was key to his success. And I don't know if there's something about his innovation that just kind of almost came out of ignorance. Like he's just doing what he's doing. He's not like, necessarily thinking about like, oh, this is innovative. He's just like, I'm doing what I'm doing. So yes, he was super innovative. Let's see. The thing about Nirvana is that their music never ages. Yeah, I know. That's the most amazing thing about Nirvana too. Is like you can listen to especially Nevermind, and especially Nevermind, and I would say Incesticide um, and the Unplugged one don't really show their age at all. Like you can still listen to them and you might think that it came out yesterday because they're so really good engineered. Bleach is a little bit dated, and I think so is In Utero just a little bit. To me, they would be like a little bit In Utero a little less, but Bleach a little bit dated. But like if you turn on Nevermind, like it's like if you didn't know, somebody could have told you it came out yesterday, and you like, yeah, this is something that's awesome, a pop song. All right, let's see. Grunge lasted a couple more years after Kurt Cobain's death, once the era of boy bands, pop princesses, girl power, and TRL began. It was all over. Oh man, you guys, Tracy has such good insights on this, and Terrell, you're having such good insights on this, and the other guy, I'm going to read his quote here in just a minute, has such good insights on this. Sunshine Cool Water, thank you so much for all your fantastic insights, and just giving me so much to talk about. Uh, yeah, it lasted a couple more years, but alternative rock still exists. Like it, alternative rock is still like a thing. It kind of changed too. It kind of alternative rock kind of um, morphed into emo kind of thing, but it was still such a an influence, like such, it still like exists. I know, like there's like this big debate on when grunge died. Did it die in '94 with Kurt's death, or did it die in '96 with the breakup of Soundgarden? By the way, I can't stand Pearl Jam. I don't care if I get hate for that or not. Now, listen, I'm a little bit older now. I can respect Pearl Jam for a few of the good songs that they did, but overall, I listen to that like 10, or I listen to something they've done later, and I'm just unimpressed. Like, I just don't like them. I mean, it's just personal to me. If you like them, that's great. I just don't like them. They just didn't appeal to me. Probably it went for me. It went Nirvana. Honestly, if you're thinking about the top four, it went Nirvana, Alice in Chains next for sure, then Soundgarden, and then Pearl Jam would have been way last. But honestly, I mean, if you're looking at it for me, like it went like Nirvana, the Pixies, REM. REM was one of my favorite bands still to this day. And then like Jesus and the Mary Chain, the Violent Femmes. It was more about alternative rock in general, not grunge specifically. Alice in Chains would be up there too, because they're an amazing band. Let's see here. Nickelback and Silverchair, Sunshine Cool Water. Thank you for joining us, by the way, Sunshine Cool Water. I don't know if you joined us for a live stream before. It's been a long time. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like and share and all that good stuff. But I'm super happy you're here and participating with us. You write, Nickelback and Silverchair were great, but the industry dropped the grunge label for new metal and other formulated type bands. Yeah. I mean, it had its day, it ran its course, and in the way that hair metal had its backlash, grunge rock had its backlash, and grunge rock got labeled heroin rock, much the same way like bands like Motley Crue and Poison got labeled hair metal by opposers to them. Grunge rock got labeled heroin music, heroin rock, by bands that came later. And I remember bands like Sugar Ray, and then I forgot the name of the band. That's just escaping me at the moment. But they got the "Somebody Once Told Me the World Is Gonna Roll Me." That band right there. I remember the singer of that band, who died recently, unfortunately, said, "I am so sick of all this sad hair metal bands, and or not hair. I'm so sick of all this heroin rock, and I'm just going to come out with something happy and go lucky." Let's see. Terrell writes, in my humble opinion, post-grunge kind of picks up where grunge left off. Yeah, it does pick up there, but it was you had the rise of millennial desires and wants, and then the end of the Gen X kind of wants, and you see that on MTV with the rise of, like you said, TRL. And other things like that came along. As Robert would say, to each their own. Yes, Tracy, to each their own, especially when it comes to music like that. All right. And then Terrell writes, Green Day came in the right place at the right time in 1984 with their release of the backdrop album, Dookie, just as audiences were still mourning the loss of Cobain. Yeah. And that was one of the bands that I kind of got excited about when they came out. When Green Day came out, I was really excited about Green Day because it was seeming like there was this industry movement to make everything sound like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains, and and it was just, I mean, it was just rolling out. It was just rolling out, and and Green Day kind of really brought back a punk vibe to it, particularly kind of a pop punk vibe to it. And I remember really taking notice when Green Day came out, because Green Day was a great band, and Green Day was a band that I really enjoyed at the time. I still enjoy Green Day. And so yeah, Green Day was a great band. And then Tracy Rothmeyer is right. Smash Mouth. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tracy. That was the band I was thinking of. So, gotta have some stuff to talk about here. Kind of winding down a bit. We've only been on for 37 minutes, but I might be done. Just on a personal note, I am going to be moving back to Utah. I'm probably leaving in the next few days here. A little bit sad. Tennessee was very hopeful. I was hoping to get some things accomplished here that I wasn't able to get accomplished, but I feel like I'm in a really, really good place. I'm not in a great place financially, but I'm in a good place emotionally. Like I've come to kind of an end of certain things that I know a lot of you, especially insiders, are privy to, and the depression that I was in a serious depression. I had to actually get antidepressive medication, and I was I mean, I don't want to scare anybody. I wouldn't have done anything to take my own life, but I was like what's called passive suicidal ideology, where you didn't mind if you lived or died. Like I didn't even mind at all. And it was super sad. It was super sad what I went through. And it was one of those situations where I really thought that it was going to work out, and it was really going to matter, and it didn't. It didn't matter, and that sent me into this huge depression. And I'm still talking about it, getting a little bit emotional. I know a lot of people are going to be able to click on this video later and be like, yeah, I thought we were talking about Nirvana. You're talking about yourself. Sorry. Just going off here, thinking of things to talk about until we find something else. I'm going to move back there and kind of regain a little bit. It's been a struggle to be out here, quite honestly. It's been a struggle financially to be out here and just finding things able to do. And I need a time of just rest. I've got a job waiting for me back in Utah and everything. So, all right, let's see. We got some more comments here. Terrell, congrats on your move back to Utah. Thank you. Next time you see me, hopefully it'll be with all the cool stuff behind me. I'm living in an Airbnb right now. God's been really super good to me. I stay in this Airbnb for like literally pennies, but it's more than I can afford right now. So I'm going to be moving back to Utah pretty soon. And Tracy writes, be safe on your move. I will certainly, Tracy. Thank you so much. And And then Sunshine Coolwater writes, I can recognize music genres that hit peaks in the 60s, early 70s, and new wave grunge period of the 80s and 90s, but can anyone recognize the creative period afterwards? Hmm, that's a good question. Um, and I think part of the problem with being able to answer that is I think Jack White would be one of those people that we would do that with. But we're moving into a new era. Um, we're moving into a new era technologically as well, and so um, the way we used to buy and listen to music is different than the way we used to buy and listen to music in from the 60s to 2003. I mean, that's a long period of people buying records, buying tapes, and buying CDs. And now you have the explosion of the internet. Obviously, the internet started in 1993, uh, but uh, but obviously advanced to where people were. It was a common usage by 2003. A little bit more usage in the 1990 in the late 90s, but you had things like Napster, and then you had the advent of YouTube in 2007, um, and you just had a whole new flood of people who are trying to make it. Probably, just to be honest with you, Sunshine, one of the bands that I have absolutely loved. I mean, loved is a band called Brand New. I think they are fantastic. They have been my absolute favorite band since Nirvana. I think their music is incredible. They have about 5 albums, and they're broken up now. The singer got himself into a little bit of trouble, but their last album, which was released in 2017, Science Fiction, is great. Now their first album is very punk. It's more like maybe like a more dirtier version of Green Day kind of a thing. But they're and if you like that, that's great. But really, like emotionally driven, intense lyrics. If you have not listened to them, I would listen to "The God and Devil Are Raging Inside of Me," "Daisy," and "Science Fiction." But every one of their albums is really, really super good. Science Fiction's was their last album. That was one of my favorite ones. So they would be to me like this incredible bright spot in music, um, and something that's to me stands out in other ways. But whether or not they get recognized or not, but that happened with a lot of other bands. I would say that like the Pixies, like I think they were incredibly innovative at the time when they came out in 1986 or 88 or something like that, and they were incredibly innovative, but they didn't get quite the popularity as a Nirvana or an Alice in Chains or something like that. All right, Terrell writes, I didn't mention the fact that Dave Grohl formed Foo Fighters as sort of a phoenix rising from the ashes and and healing process after Cobain's death. Yes, Foo Fighters continues to move forward. Um, I remember falling in love with the Foo Fighters like immediately after the death of Kurt Cobain, and and it was just amazing. I mean, um, I was impressed right away, like right away, and I didn't know what to expect because I went out the day it was out and got the first Foo Fighters CD, and the day it was out, I was like, "Is this going to be like Nirvana repackaged or whatever?" And I was so pleasantly surprised that it was their own stuff. Like it was their own stuff. It was unique. It was meaningful. It was heartfelt. It was catchy, and it didn't disappoint, and they still don't disappoint. One of my favorite songs, and then they continued to do that. Dave Grohl is like continued to be this rock icon in his own right. Um, and I do believe, just on a side note, that Dave Grohl would have left Nirvana and gone on to be something, in his own right outside of Nirvana. I really wish that I could have heard the collaboration between Michael Stipe and Kurt Cobain. That would have that I can only imagine what that would have been like. Um, and I'm really sad that that never happened. That's like one of the biggest things that I mourn over is because Kurt Cobain and Michael Stipe. Kurt Cobain really looked up to Michael Stipe and really looked up to REM, and thought of REM as a band that didn't compromise. And you can hear not similarities in sound, but similarities in lyrical quality between Nirvana and Michael Stipe, between Michael Stipe's writing style and Kurt Cobain's writing style. There are a lot of kind of similarities, very melodic kind of, um, I don't know, like ambiguous kind of lyrical content. And Kurt Cobain actually admitted at one point, he goes, "Why are your lyrics so?" He said, "Because the lyrics are the last thing I think about, and I'm lazy." And he said, like, he goes through his journals and he just kind of picks something that fits the song. So it might not necessarily agree or even be connected with the former lyric. Uh, and um, and it's because it's not, he doesn't necessarily agree, or agree with the former lyric or connected with the former lyric. It created this ambiguity in which you as the listener could put your own story into it, or kind of come up with your own meaning to it. And he was, and Kurt Cobain, by the way, was all on board with that. He was just like, "That's fine with me. I'm fine with that." So what did you write here? Yeah, they were the rising phoenix out of the ashes, and has carried on um, this kind of underground movement into the mainstream. And I don't mind, just so you know, like, I don't mind underground music becoming mainstream. I'm not like anti-success in these bands. I'm anti-manufactured success. So, which is kind of funny because, like, the Monkees is one of my favorite bands, and they were if anybody was a manufactured success, it was the Monkees. But I listen to things now that I just wouldn't have listened to in the 90s and early 2000s, and just enjoy it for what it is. But at the time, the Monkees was like an exception to the rule because I just loved them so much. All right, let's see. Terrell writes, Britpop had its moments like Oasis, but the bitter sibling rivalry between Liam and Noel Gallagher pretty much doomed the band. Yeah, it did. I I liked a lot of what Oasis did. I liked Blur as a better band. There's a whole Blur Oasis kind of feud going on. I mean, obviously Oasis was the more popular band, but I thought Blur was, I don't know, just the better kind of band. Um, there were a lot of bands that kind of came out that I don't know if they were like the Brit pop thing. Like, you had, these two waves. That's why they called new wave, is because it was there was the first wave, which was Beatlemania, because they came over, and then in the 1980s they had the advent of MTV, and with the advent of MTV came music videos, and Britain was just making better music videos, and they got super popular, and so it became its own right in it. And you had the post punk bands like the Cure and stuff kind of wrapping up into this as well. But then there was this attempt at third wave uh, pop, uh, rock music, and that was the Oasis Blur kind of thing. And there were other bands that kind of filtered into that, but Oasis and Blur were kind of the ones that kind of came out aftermath. I don't know. Were the Stone Roses, were they Britain? Were they Brits or not? I can't remember, but I know the Stone Roses were popular after that as well. And Terrell writes, oh, wait a minute. Did I miss something? No, I didn't. I think we're coming to the end of our comments then. So if we're coming to the end of our comments, let me wrap up by unless there's more comments that are gonna come. Let me kind of wrap up by saying that I still feel Kurt Cobain's death, and I always I mean, it's hard because when you feel something so deeply as I felt with Nirvana, every time I listen to Nirvana, I am taken back to the place I was. Like when I listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit, I'm taken back to Smells Like Teen Spirit. I'm taken back to that. And I'm taking back to that imagination, that wonder, like, what is this, thing that's going on? And it's, and when he died, it was almost like a part of me died and a part of my world died, because it was like, what I always think about, what would he have done if he hadn't have passed away? And he joined the 27 Club, as you know, and he did it by taking his own life. And that was super sad and super tragic. And I understand depression, and I feel that depression. And I miss him, and I miss his legacy, and I miss what might have been. And I miss all of that. Let's see here. I'm gonna read another. As if luck, even if comments come in by only 2 people, I will definitely read them. I think the Roses were a British band. I think so too. They never really caught my attention. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about them, but like, I wasn't like, they had a couple good songs, but like when I listened to like the whole album, I don't know if you felt this way, Tracy. You'll have to let me know. But when I listened to the whole album, it wasn't something that I like really got into, personally. So I don't know if you felt the same way or not, but I'd like to hear your opinion on it. Terrell writes, 1994 was the year Notorious Big released his groundbreaking debut, Ready to Die, and the beginning of the East Coast, West Coast hip-hop feud. Yes. That was another big movement in music history, and it's a movement that I'm not as familiar with as I was into rock, because I just wasn't into that as much. So it just wasn't. Rap was not my thing at the time. I really got more into rap, quite honestly, with Slim Shady, Eminem. I kind of liked rap in the 80s when it was kind of emerging, but it just wasn't for me. I mean, it just didn't. I was a rocker through and through. So I mean, rock music was my genre of music. So I only like 2 of their songs. I think we fall down on the same page on that. I only like 2 of their songs as well. So anyway, all right, folks. Well, I'm so happy. We've almost filled up an entire hour here. I talked a little bit about myself, but mostly we talked about music and Nirvana and remembering Kurt Cobain. And he will be missed, and he's a legend. And I know there's a lot of hate when it comes to Kurt Cobain, but Um, he, like him or not like him, he is a legend in music, and he helped change the face of rock music. And just like there was a before Beatles and there was an after Beatles, there was a before Nirvana and there was an after Nirvana. And everybody who are haters can like it or lump it. And I personally like it, and I hope you like it too. If you like this video and you stayed with me all the way to the end, please like, comment, subscribe. I got over 1,000 subscribers now. It's awesome. We are on our way, and maybe I'll be doing more of these live videos soon. So it's just a matter of just kind of coming back and doing it. And now that I've come back and doing it, I may have caught the bug in it again. So I want to thank you so much. If you're interested in supporting me, please support me on what is it? Patreon. That's right, Patreon. Support me on Patreon. It would mean the world to me. I know I lost a lot of supporters financially when I stopped making videos, and I understand. You got to support people who are actually producing content. But if you're looking to support me, I would super appreciate it on Patreon. It's like Patreon /cereal for dinner or something like that. All right, take care. I love you all. We'll talk to you again real soon.